Kong in the trunk. King Kong, King Kong, King Kong.
I'm back. Road Rants on the continuing horror podcast series. As we know, I am counting down the Friday the 13th films. Also, with this being a podcast, a video podcast, I always say this because in case people are new to the channel, I've got subscribers that followed me over from my original channel, Road Rants. These are completely informal. I will smoke while I'm recording these because the channel's not monetized right now, so I'm just not that worried about it. I also talk about other things, generally at the beginning of these, such as what's going on with the channel, what's going on with all the channels, and just in general things that is going on in life, okay? And I want to thank everybody that watches these because I've gotten a ton of good feedback on these podcasts. Jake, the movie guy, told me the other day, he said, I love these things. Bunch of people really, bunch of subs really have gotten back to me with a lot of good feedback on these. So that's cool. That's cool. And I appreciate that. Now, as far as the channels go, Black and White Sports, which is the channel I own with our good friend John Matrix, the Common Sense Sports channel, has exploded. So we feel great about that. We've added roughly 1,000 subscribers in about 10 days. We just crossed 2,000 subs about 3 hours ago. And it's growing. We've got 3 or 4 videos over there that are over 20,000 views. We've got one right now that took off about 5 days ago, maybe. That's now over 50,000 views and heading towards 60,000 views. I did a video on Bubba Wallace over there that got it's over 25,000 views now. And we've got a couple of other ones that's got over 30,000 views. Again, drink break. Completely informal. So, that's one of the channel updates. Road Rants continues to grow like crazy. I think my 30-day average right now is 340 new subs. And good God, 220 of those is probably in the last 8 or 9 days, maybe. So we just crossed 2,000. I know all of my subs on this channel are subbed to the other channel, or most of them. So thank you, guys. We're kicking ass. I was scheduled not to hit 2,000 until January 1st. So when I changed content, it jumped me ahead 5 months. I mean, and now we're looking at 3,000. By the end of the year, 3,000, 3,500. I think there's an outside shot at 5,000 by the end of the year. I really do. I really do. And, I want all of our channels to make it. This is something I enjoy, but eventually I want it to be something much larger. So I'm hoping. I'm not one of these people that need to become like some YouTube celebrity. I don't want to be that, really. But a really good part-time supplemental income, I don't see myself ever not working. At least in part, right? I own a business, and I was thinking about this the other day. I was like, what if YouTube, started making more than my current business? And I was like, you know what? Even though the business is hard on me physically, and it kicks my ass, I could right off the bat think of at least 3 or 4 clients of mine I would keep servicing. I would. Not only for the income, but just because I'd want to continue outside of my weight training, another avenue of being active. So Now, we are on with the countdown. Again, this was a suggestion from Gomer Kyle, which is one of my Patreons. Thank you. And he used to have a different name. He changed his name recently. And this was on my radar. Like I've said before, I've wanted to do this really since the inception of my channel. But it got so Star Wars heavy for so long, I didn't get to dive into horror like I would have liked. You know, Star Wars, what happens is you try to race for the algorithm with YouTube. And Star Wars just never picked up. It never picked up in the algorithm. So, like I would have liked. We are on number 4. Friday the 13th, part 2. And this movie was made, they started filming it in 4 months after the original came out. And this was released in 81. It's known for a couple of things. Number one, it's the introduction of Jason. Real Jason, not a dream sequence Jason like in the original, but actually an introduction of Jason. And Jason does not have the hockey mask in this. He's got a sack over his head. And honestly, it kind of works. It kind of does work. And I was noticing something last night. I said starting with part 3, the first 4 of these movies still had a real element of scare to them, of terror. They were creepy. The first 4. Even though the original is way down on my, not way down on my list, but it's down on my list some. There was a real element of creepiness to those, to the original. And then part 3 had a level of creepiness in it. And part 2 really has a level of creepy terror in it. And the feel of the movie, it's kind of scary, okay? And I was laughing with my dogs last night because I settled in to watch the movie. And I had recently, I actually, every time I do these, I go back and I'll watch documentary. And just so I can refamiliarize myself with some of the things that I might have forgotten. And sometimes I watch a particular film, I'll watch that part of the doc twice. Even though I had seen it in the past, I'll watch it a couple more times. Just so I can get all my ducks in a row. And I sat down to watch the movie, and it's starting to get kind of dark at the house here. And I told y'all I live on a community lake. And I got up, and look, I'm a pretty tough old boy. I'm not going to kid you, okay? But I got up, and I looked at my dogs, and my bearded collie kind of looked at me like, what's going on, Dad? And I looked at her, and I said, young lady, I think we're locking the doors for this one. Because this one's got a real... I'll tell you what I think is scary. Crazy-ass hillbillies, to me, are scary. Why? Because in Texas, that could really be a thing, okay? It's not out of the realm of possibility to take a wrong turn or end up in the woods and run into some crazy-ass hillbillies. And in this movie, Jason is sort of a crazy-ass mongoloid hillbilly. I mean, if you just want to know the truth. And there's a lot of creepy ancillary stuff in this thing. Now, I know Gomer Kyle is thinking, are you ever going to get around to this? Amy Steele plays the main character in this. They're kind of two main characters, Paul, and he's played by John Fury. and Amy Steele, who plays Jenny. And they are both counselors. And all these kids come in, I say kids, early age adults come in, and they're getting ready for camp to reopen. And they show up, and you know, they all kind of huddle in. The movie starts out with a couple pulling up in their big truck. I noticed the truck. The truck was black. It was a Chevy. It had an open top or something on the backside. It had those big bars on the back. And I was like, man, I sort of remember those trucks with the big tires. You know, it was like that 1978 Chevy black. And I was just like, man, it kind of was cool. I was like, that sort of brings back some memories of seeing trucks like that back when I was a kid. So I thought that was kind of cool. Anyway, they get out. They use the phone. They're calling their buddy who is already at Crystal Lake or in the town of Crystal Lake. And it's kind of funny because their buddy is sort of a prankster, and he actually has the truck towed around the corner, and he's standing there. So it's cool. There's a lot of good. I will say this. This movie had good ancillary characters. So did Part 3, where some of the side characters are good. They're very likable. Very likable side characters. And some of these movies suffer badly from not likable side characters. You're like, God, I wish they would die quick. And the other thing was, I said in one of my previous reviews that the first 4 films were films unlike the later ones, where in the later ones you sort of root for Jason as almost this weird anti-hero that's doing justice against sins of teenagers. You know, they're doing drugs, premarital sex, blah, blah, blah. You're rooting for Jason. Let's see how he kills the teens. But in these first 4 movies, you're not rooting for Jason. You're rooting for the people to survive. And that changes the dynamics of the movie a lot. Okay, and the way you feel about it, and the heightened fear factor when watching the movie. My cigarette went out, so I didn't light another one. The same cigarette. And Amy Steele, I got to thinking about this, and I was like, is she the best of all the women in the series? The best heroine that survives all these? And I've got to tell you, I think she is. Amy Steele is so impressive as Jenny in this movie. And, you know, most people have seen this movie several times. She is the one that is last woman standing in the last third of the film. Kind of like Dana Kimmel's character was in Part 3. And Jason starts a pursuit of her. They all arrive at the camp. They start building some chemistry with the cast. And something you don't see a lot with these films. The group split off. And I always thought that was wild. The group splits off. The counselors decide they're going to go into town and go dancing and get something to eat, blah, blah, blah. And so they all take off. Well, oddly enough, and Jenny, Amy Steele, and John Fury, Paul, they're sort of a couple, okay? They're not together, but there's love interest there. And they go into town as well, but they take her car. They take the big truck, the other group. And these two decide to come back to the cabins. Well, the other group decided, conveniently, and it works out for them, the prankster went into town with 5 or 6 other people from the counselors, And he walks up to a guy and says, "Is there an after hours place around here?" And the guy says, "Yeah." Well, guess what? They never make it back to camp. So they all survived. How odd is that? It's so odd. You see a group that splits off and they become ancillary survivors because they just didn't come back, or they weren't back yet while the killing was still going. You know? And I'm sure they're the ones. You got to remember, 2, 3, and 4 all take place within about a 4 or 5 day period. Which is strange because the look of Jason changes so much between 2 and 4. Wildly different looks. Okay. And of course, the hockey mask is picked up in part 3. Now, I would be remiss if I did not mention that Adrienne King comes back from part 1 at the beginning of this movie. She was originally asked to come back and just be in the sequel, star in it. Well, her agent wanted too much money. Or at least that's the story they tell. I get the sense from the documentary that Adrienne King wasn't happy with not just flat coming back and, I guess, getting paid. She didn't say it was because of money, but it just seemed like they brought her character back for a cameo at the beginning of this movie. And I'm going to tell you, I discovered something after all of these years. I didn't care about her character too much. Even though she cut off, she's great in the original. She cuts off Betsy Palmer's head and Pamela Voorhees' head, and all, you know, it launches us in, right? But I always felt like her performance at the beginning of the second movie was all over the place. Well, there was a reason for that. She wasn't given a script. They brought her in for like a day's worth of filming, and she ad-libbed all of it. I was like, okay. And unfortunately, nothing against Miss King, you can tell she ad-libbed all of it. It's just not very good. It's talking on the phone. There's a dream sequence. She wakes up from the dream having flashbacks. And by the way, all this is happening like a couple of months after she cuts off Pamela Voorhees' head. She's back up in town, Crystal Lake, which is sort of strange. I didn't know she was from Crystal Lake, but she's in a house in Crystal Lake, unless it doesn't say she's not in Crystal Lake. So if she went 3 hours away, there was a hell of a trip made by somebody. Okay, but you're like, okay, I guess she just stayed in town. Because I always got the notion that she came into the camp in the original one. Maybe from out of town, but I guess she didn't. I guess she was from Crystal Lake. Well, anyway, the movie starts out there, and a kid's walking. There's been rain. Kid's outside at night walking through a puddle, and he's singing the Itsy Bitsy Spider, and it's really creepy. It is. And the kid steps in a puddle or something and gets called home, and the kid runs off, and then all of a sudden a boot steps down off the curb, and we find out it's Jason. Well, she's talking on the phone, blah, blah, blah. She hangs up the phone. She opens up the fridge, and Pamela Voorhees' head is in the fridge. Whoa, crap. All of a sudden, ice pick, boom, right in the side of the head, kills her. And you're like, damn, she survived the original, died in the first 3 minutes of the second one. Ain't that a bitch? And I realized, I was like, wow, a big a fan as I am of this series, I didn't give a rat's ass that she died. And I laughed about that last night. I was like, wow, I'm sort of glad she's gone. I thought that was crazy. After I never felt that way. And I've seen part 2 100 times. But last night it just struck me. I was like, I'm glad she's dead. I feel like Jack Nicholson in Batman as the Joker. I'm glad you're dead. Talking to Jack Palance's fried skeleton corpse. If anybody remembers that, when he handshakes him and turns it and fries him. So anyway, I was like, wow. I'm glad you're dead. That's all I kept thinking. And then part 2, where we start seeing Jenny and all them show up at the cabin, the where part 2 really kind of starts, or of the new story, is 5 years later. And Sean Cunningham did not direct this. Steve Miner did. The great Steve Miner, who directed part 3, directed Halloween H2O. He does a phenomenal job directing this movie. And Cunningham is producing it. And I believe his wife was the editor. I think her name's Susan. I hope I'm not wrong, but I'm pretty sure his wife's Susan, is an editor. And also Frank Mancuso Jr., who was so instrumental in all of these sequels. This was his first sort of fall into this, and he was the associate producer, and he was the son of the head of Paramount, if I remember correctly. And he would go on to truly produce these movies after the fact. And something happened, and he ended up getting a bigger behind-the-scenes role with this movie. And I know him and Steve Miner worked pretty close. Miner does a phenomenal... I mean, he's done a lot of good episodic TV. But in horror terms, I mean, to have done Friday 2 and 3 and Halloween H2O, that's impressive. You've done Jason twice and Myers once. And the Myers one you got Jamie Lee Curtis and Josh Hartnett, who was about to become a massive star, and now he's kind of faded off. That's sort of weird. So anyway, all those ancillary characters have gone into town. They survive. The group that stays back, they didn't fare so well. And Jason starts killing them off one by one in some very interesting ways. Now, further up in the story, there is a scene that ties in late in the movie. And a cop is driving down the road, and he sees a figure run across the road into the woods, and he stops, and he's going to run after it. And there is a chase through the woods, and it's one of the things that adds a creepy factor. And I know you may be thinking, oh, you're kind of all over the place. I don't necessarily do these want to talk about segments of the movie in the order they happen in the movie. I just want to talk about parts of the movie. And if something ties in, I'll go back to it or whatever. In other words, I'm not trying to give you a chronological walk you through the film. I just want to talk about important parts and anything related to those parts. Well, the cop runs across into the woods, and there is a long chase through the woods. Well, Jason runs through like a little creek that's running through there, a real shallow creek. And then the cop comes to the creek, and he kind of stops and looks at it. You don't realize it's going to become significant later. But it's a very good thing that Steve Miner did, because it allows you later in the movie to realize when there's a chase between Jenny and Jason, Jenny's running, and you see her running, and creek. And then you see, and you're like, that's not good. Why is that not good? Because when the cop was running, he eventually comes to an old pieced together shack. And we find out that's Jason's homestead. Well, Jenny's heading right for it. Now, mind you, Jenny has had a part 3 Dana Kimmel like back and forth with Jason already. Back up at the, he has. There's, I mean, they run around through the woods. There's a scene where she actually hides in one of the cabins. He comes in. She's under the bed. And it's a good scene. It's played out so well. She's hiding under the bed, and he comes in. And he's looking around. He's getting ready to walk out. But a rat comes running under the bed right across Amy Steele, a.k.a. Jenny, right across her hand, right in front of her face. And when that rat runs through there, she pees. And you're like, oh, fuck. Highly effective horror scene. She pees, and the pee begins to run out from under the bed. Jason's just about to walk out the door, and he turns around, and he sees that pee coming out from under the bed. So the door opens and closes. She thinks he's gone. She comes to come out, and he's standing up on a chair with a pitchfork, getting ready to come down on her, but the chair breaks. So he falls over, and she runs out. She did pull out a chainsaw in this scene, by the way, which I did not understand why she didn't keep using the chainsaw. Because she turned the chainsaw off and just like hit him with it or something. And I was like, why didn't you just chainsaw massacre his ass up there? So that wasn't real clear. There's a lot of good death scenes. Probably the best death in this movie is a pretty impactful one. There is a handicapped guy in this movie. He's bound to a wheelchair. And he says he's got spinal damage. He can't walk. And during a scene in the movie, he comes outside to investigate. By the way, one of the great things about some of these movies, a storm starts rolling in. It just adds something. It adds something scary in the background. Starting to rain a little bit. Lightning, thunder. Just adds a aura of creepiness. Well, he comes out to investigate. He's rolling his wheelchair out there and he's looking around. And this is where you realize all bets are off in this movie. Because he gets slapped right across the forehead with a machete. Whack! And the chair goes backwards down steps. I mean, a long set of steps, 30 foot. But you're sitting there thinking to yourself, damn, he killed a paralyzed dude in a wheelchair and didn't think twice about it. I also got thinking about something else. This is pretty wild. You know, I used to think Jason Lives. I was thinking back and I was like, Jason Lives is the first one of these I ever saw when I was a kid. I was wrong. It was part 2. It was part 2, and I was probably 7 or 8 years old, and we were living in Liberty City, Texas. I bet John Matrix knows where that's at because it's somewhat close to his neck of the woods. And we lived there twice, actually, when I was a kid growing up. My dad worked down in those refineries down around Houston. A lot of times, sometimes occasionally running them, the whole refinery. And we rented this because I remember there was a nude scene. And it's a great nude scene. This lady's got an unbelievable body on her. She comes up out of the water. She's completely nude. I mean, frontal nudity now. And I remember my folks made me cover up my face. Grab something to cover up. Little did they know I think we had gotten some pizza, and I grabbed a paper towel. I'm holding the paper towel up. I could see right through it. That obviously led to my demise later in life. Oh, chicks. By the way, if you're watching this and you're like, man, Rhodes, your hair is getting a little, I need to shave it. It's getting long. It's getting gray. Yeah. So, yeah, it's definitely worth a shave. I had kind of been shaving it for somebody, but that's not going anywhere. So, I'm still going to keep shaving it because I like shaving it. So anyway, we get to the end of this thing, and she has ended up at his shack. She runs in. She can hear somebody coming. It's him. When she takes a step in, he's got a back room. And his mother's head's back there along with some of his victims. Lit up by candlelight. Now, she is in school to be a psychologist. So she had talked about this a little bit when they were out at the bar. She was talking to Paul about it. What if there was really a guy, because he told a story about Jason, and she said, Paul, what if there's really a guy out there that saw his mother killed, has been living off the land, and he would be messed up. And I think she said something to the effect of, would he still be like a kid in his mind, blah, blah, blah. Well, all this goes through her head. She realizes this is mother. This is his mother. Because the story was, she got her head chopped off. Well, her head's right there. So is Pamela Voorhees' blue sweater from the original movie. And so she's a fast thinker. She runs up and she grabs that sweater and she puts it on. She tries to rearrange her hair a little bit because she's got strawberry blondish hair. And she's trying to make herself look like Jason's mother. So she shuffles her way in front of the head. So when Jason comes in, she's like, Jason, your work is done now, and mother is pleased. And I'm like, whoa! We have completely taken on the Pamela Voorhees persona. Very cool. Very good stuff. Great acting from her. Jenny is a hell of a trooper in this thing. She's a hell of a trooper. She looks like hell at the end. And I would be remiss not to say Amy Steele is a natural beauty. This woman is a natural beauty. You can tell. Even in the documentary where I think she's actually 60 now. She was a woman that never needed a lot of makeup and was a pretty woman. So I know you're like, that's a side note. Look, I don't care. If I think a woman's pretty, an actress or whatever, I'm going to tell you. I don't give a shit. Toxic masculinity is where it's at on this channel. She's a very nice-looking woman. And so she takes on that persona. And she's picked up a machete. And she's about to whack the shit out of Jason. But when she raises the machete, her body shifts just enough that he looks down and sees Mama's head. So he realizes, oh shit, this ain't Mama. So he raises up whatever he had in his hand up. Oh, it's that fucking pitchfork. And knocks the machete away from her. And then all of a sudden, Paul, who got his ass handed to him by Jason earlier in like a hand-to-hand combat. But I'll say this, Paul fared better than them guys as big or bigger than him would in just the next movie. I thought that was kind of strange because the guy in the next movie, I can't remember his name now. I talked about him in the Part 3 review, was a big dude. And if anybody could have went toe-to-toe with Jason, Jason just swung his ass around. But I'll tell you, Richard Booker in Part 3 and Ted White in Part 4 have much more physicality than Warrington Gillette or Steve Dukowski did. And yes, there were two Jasons, and there was all kinds of behind-the-scenes fuckery in the role of Jason. Now, a lot of the actors said their Jason in their eyes was Warrington, but Warrington was not really a stunt guy, so they had a problem there. Well, anyway, Paul comes back in. Him and Jason go to wrestling. Jason's got him down, and Amy picks up that machete. Amy still does. Jenny, and whacks him right here. Okay. He's like, ugh, falls over. Okay. So Paul gets up. We don't see Jason's face, but they take the hood off, and they're both like, oh, he's fucked up. And they go back to the cabins. Well, by the way, one of the counselors that was out there, one of the would-be counselors, had a dog that disappeared named Muffin. Well, they hear something at the door. They open the door, and it's Muffin. And we thought Muffin was dead because there was a dead dog out in the woods earlier. Strange. Okay. So right as Paul picks up Muffin, Amy still kind of gets off the bed, and she's like, oh, blah, blah, blah. And all of a sudden, Jason comes through, crashing through the window, no hood on, looking like the hillbilly elephant man. I'm shitting you negative. Hillbilly elephant man grabs her, pulls her through the window. Now, what's odd about this sequence? You never really know if it's a dream sequence or not. And that's still not cleared up, to be honest with you. And the odd thing, you get to the next scene, and it's her being loaded into an ambulance, and she's saying, where's Paul? And Paul's nowhere to be seen. And even to this day, nobody seems to know what happened to Paul. Like, did Paul get killed? Did Paul disappear? Did Paul survive and he's in a different ambulance? Because I think, if I remember correctly, one of the guys actually says, we didn't find any Paul. Okay, or something like that. So it's real ambiguous. People don't know. Now, they did show a picture of the script, and it had some handwriting on it. And I could have swore it said Paul's dead, or something like that. Paul died. But I don't think any of that is actually official. Wild. Okay, so we don't know if Paul goes in the official body count or not. I'd have to look that up, and I guess I should have, but it's one of the more controversial things that ever happened in the series of movies was, did Paul die or did Paul not die? Pretty wild. Pretty wild. This is a hell of a good movie. I said, as we were moving along, you know, Freddy versus Jason got like a 7.25 out of me, or 7.5 or something. We're in hellified good territory. For many years, this movie would have occupied the third spot. For many years, it would have been in the top 3. I give this a 7.75 out of 10. And I could have went 8 here. But at the end of the day, after all these years, after I really got to dissect these movies for these podcasts, I didn't like the look of Jason with his mask off. Adrian King ended up being a very weak link in this movie at the beginning of the movie. When your survivor from the previous movie is somebody that all of a sudden you can't wait to see die, that's sort of a problem, okay? So they probably should have done a better job of having something more organized, prepared in the story for her, even though it took place 5 years before Jenny and Paul and the counselors come into the story. It did feel really thrown together. Not so much the scenes as her dialogue. The dialogue was terrible, and she had to ad-lib it. And I don't put that on her. That's not her problem. That's a writer's problem. They've got to prepare that portion of the story and have a script for it, and they did not. They did not. Now, she also talked about, I guess, when she goes to these horror Comic-Cons. Man, they had one in Illinois. It's canceled, obviously. But I would have loved to have went to because it's a celebration of Jason Lives. But anyway, she said when she goes to these cons, people are really upset with the demise of Alice because people are like, she survived the first film only to get offed as a side note at the beginning. And I guess if you're a huge, huge fan of the original, let's say the original is in your top 3 or is your favorite, I could see you being pissed royally. If you really loved Alice's character, I could see you being piss hot mad over that. Piss hot mad. But I wasn't a big fan of Alice anyway. Now, she did a hell of a good acting job in the original Friday movie. But it became a weak link. I think, honestly, it dropped my score on this by a full quarter point. That part. And Jason Elephant Man. But the ancillary characters, very good. Paul, played by John Fury, very good. The third act, excellent. The kills, the double impalement laying on the bed, which is a ripoff from Twitch of a Death Nerve, an old 70s movie. They blatantly ripped off a kill from it. Now, Sean Cunningham swears up and down they didn't know the movie existed. Maybe they didn't know. I don't know. But it's a blatant ripoff of a kill in a different movie. But it's a hell of a good kill. And there's an extended version of it that none of us has ever gotten to see that is supposed to be really badass. Tone. Overall tone of the movie, awesome. Creepy. The woods are creepy. The chase through the woods is creepy. Crazy Ralph from the first film gets whacked in this movie. I think he may be the very first kill in this movie. The very first kill once we get to the new set of counselors. Alice was the first kill. But Crazy Ralph, who was in the first one, it's got a death curse. He gets killed. So, he's out there stalking, and Jason gets him. Chokes his ass out with a leather strap, I think, around a tree. Good stuff. It's good stuff. And the other good thing about this is something that Steve Miner did in the third movie. He did not let you see Jason from, for example, the mid-torso up. And in a lot of places, didn't let you see him at all. So it kept a fear factor of what are we dealing with here exactly. He kept that. So that's where I'm at. A 7.75 out of 10. Which is good. That's good. It's good. We are down to the top 3, folks. every time I do one, people start guessing the next one. So this is coming down to, if you know these movies, you've got a pretty good idea what the top 3 are now. You just don't know in what order they're in right now. So that's the key, right? We've only got 3 films left. So you know the Star Wars original trilogy of Friday movies are these 3 films. So, and we're going to have a step up in the next film in quality and a step up in score. And then the top 2, I can tell you, have always been with me in a historic dogfight for number 1. I mean, they are close and the scores are high. Okay? The scores are high because I love both films. And they both have something besides Jason in common. So, so you'll have a step up and then you'll have a historically Star Wars A New Hope, Empire Strikes Back situation in the top 2, only with Friday movies. I always use Star Wars analogies because there will be Star Wars fans that will set through this horror podcast because they support my channel, and I appreciate that. Also, I'm talking to Death by Saber and Kermit the Log right now. They've got a horror podcast situation, and they asked me to be on it. So we're working that out right now to try to decide when we can tape that. I'm looking forward to it. I got to try to figure out when to do it because I'm trying to get my goal, 2 videos on Road Rants, 1 video on this channel, and 1 video on the sports channel every day. That's 4 videos. I know that will not happen. It'll probably be more like 1, 1, and 1. It will. And this channel will always get more content over the weekend or over probably Mondays, Thursdays, Fridays, Saturday, Sunday. You know, you might actually see 2 videos each one of those days go up on this channel. So, now, that doesn't mean breaking news, etc., like the Mandalorian trailer's coming. You're guaranteed to get a video on that day, no matter what. And I'm already putting together potential countdowns for other lists. Plus, I'm working on a Star Wars countdown right now. I'm sure you might be like, where is the next Star Wars property countdown? I kind of want to get done with the Friday countdown before I restart with the Star Wars countdown. And the next one in my Star Wars countdown has got me just so ticked off because it used to be really high and then it plummeted. Thank you, Last Jedi and the Rise of Palpatine. Hit subscribe if you are new to the channel. Subscribe to Road Rants on pop culture. If you're conservative, you like conservative politics, subscribe to Road Rants. That's my regular channel or my other channel, my main channel, whatever, however the fuck you want to call it. And if you like non-woke sports, black and white sports. And that's with John Matrix as well. So you get 2 for the price of 1 over there. Even though the videos are free to watch. Son of a... Yeah. Peace. I'm out. Till next time.
King Kong in the trunk. King Kong, King Kong, King Kong.